if you want an indictment of the spiritual state of Catholics today, it is this sort of allergy to prayer and devotion that many Catholics have. For all too many of us, our life of faith is, say, a prayer before meals, but only at home, rarely at a restaurant, and maybe, a quick prayer here and there. People certainly don't pray. A lot of people don't pray the rosary, or they'll pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet instead of the rosary. I'm not saying don't pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. I don't get into that debate. If you do it, please don't replace your rosary with it, and other things, right? They leave the life of faith mostly on a Sunday. And there's a lot, this is intertwined into everything, because then we walk around lukewarm. The life of a Catholic is to be a life of prayer. And we see this in a lot of ways. And so Bishop Strickland has a new podcast that he is doing, and it's mostly, it looks like, only on the LifeSite News website. So please go and take a look at that. Get up the updates from there as much as you can. He has his now second episode up, and here he's talking about the attempts to crush the Latin Mass and devotional life and all the rest of it. And this is just a short 2-minute excerpt from that before we'll move on to something from Cardinal Burke. So this is just posted by Michael Haynes of LifeSite on X.
True shepherds must speak against this attack. And it is an attack. We can't mince words. We can't pretend that we're just misunderstanding. It's becoming clearer all the time that many from the very top of the church are seeking to eliminate the traditional Latin Mass. As a man who continues to simply learn it, as I learn it and practice celebrating this ancient rite, the ancient rite that so many saints flourished in through the ages, we cannot allow it to be denied and denigrated. And so we have to speak clearly in ways that come difficult to me, because I want to be respectful to the Holy Father, to those who work in the Vatican. But as I've said before, the greatest respect is to speak the truth of Christ, the truth of the deposit of faith. And part of that truth is to uphold the sacred reality of the traditional Latin Mass. I have no intention of denigrating or rejecting those who are, as I was, only accustomed to what is called the Novus Ordo, the Mass since the late 60s after the Second Vatican Council. But the foundation of the Mass remains the traditional Latin Mass. And if we read the actual documents of the Council, they speak of the Mass that could be renewed and revised to some degree, but would look very much like the traditional Latin Mass. So I think we have to be very clear that attempts to eliminate or denigrate or push into the dustbin of history the traditional Latin Mass is not of the church that Jesus Christ established. We must call to correction any voice that attempts to do this with love and charity. But we must know that love and charity is always built on all that is true, all that is good, all that is beautiful, on truth incarnate, that is Jesus Christ.
Now you might wonder, what's that have to do much with devotional life and the rest? Well, you'll see here in a moment, because speaking of Michael Haynes, on a related note, Cardinal Burke gave an interview to Michael Haynes of LifeSite News, and that interview was published on permiriam.com, which I believe is Mr. Haynes' personal Substack. In that interview, Cardinal Burke talks about what he believes is the biggest problem since Vatican II in the church, which is the loss of the devotional life, which it's everything you can think of in the life of the church, including how we live as Catholics. That's a big thing. There is a cascading effect. The Mass and how it's offered, not just the traditional Mass versus Novus Ordo, but how the Novus Ordo is offered, before the council, a lot of defenders of the traditional or the Latin or the Novus Ordo like to point out that before Vatican II, there are plenty of reports of the traditional mass being offered badly, and that's true. Those priests were the same priests who, after the council, in many cases, were the ones giving you the early clown masses and the most heinous 1970s liturgical problems came from those same priests, right? But the respect that you're shown, the reverence that you show when offering a mass, will have a trickle down effect in terms of everything else in the life of the church. And you see this here in this discussion that Michael Haynes had with Cardinal Burke. He published it with the headline, "Exclusive Cardinal Burke, Loss of Devotional Life, One of the Greatest Tragedies of Post-Vatican II Era." Now, the interview is given in the context of Cardinal Burke's 9-month novena from last year. Cardinal Burke reports that 190,000 Catholics participated in it, and I think that number is actually much higher than what he is saying, because that number that he gives, 190,000, is based on the number of people who signed up on his website for it. I actually participated in this, and I didn't sign up on the website. I even promoted it through my Facebook page for Return to Tradition by simply every few weeks reposting the prayer on the Facebook page for Return to Tradition. Be that as it may, though, Mr. Haynes touches on the focus of that novena being Our Lady of Guadalupe, and how this devotion and the devotional life is key to addressing the ills of our age. And here is Cardinal Burke's response to that statement. Quote, "Yes, it is, because when we go to Our Lady, she always takes us to her divine Son, to our Lord Jesus Christ, and helps us to deepen our knowledge of him and our love for him, and then our service of him. Without that devotional, the faith is very easily reduced to an idea or an ideology that doesn't inspire anyone, and in fact leads people into error. I believe one of the greatest tragedies of the post-conciliar period is the loss of the devotional life, and we need to restore it. I saw it by the overwhelming response to the invitation to make the 9-month novena, the great thirst and hunger that people have for a personal relationship with Christ, which we have directly in the sacraments. Meeting the Lord in the sacraments, above all in the Holy Eucharist and in the sacrament of penance, is sustained through a devotional life, through relating with our Lord throughout the day and in various ways with the help of Our Lady and of the saints, angels, our guardian angel, and the other angels. So I believe that we're going to see a resurgence in the devotional life, and that will lead then to a deeper Christian life, and a deeper Christian life will lead to the transformation of society, which, as you rightly observed, has become hostile to life itself, hostile to marriage, hostile even to the free practice of religion. With this devotional life, we'll have the stamina, the courage, and the stamina to fight for a truly Christian life." End quote. If you want to see your country, you want to see society have its greatness restored, if you want to see civilization saved, you can only do so much in the political realm. This is why the anti-Moloch activists out there, I really mystified that after a couple of years ago, when the abominable case from the 1970s was overturned by the courts, they didn't then start focused at first on the political realm in the secular world, and second, in the state level rather, and secondly, the only way you're going to save civilization, which is a restoration of Christ as King. The culture needs a conversion, a voluntary conversion, and that means spreading the gospel. I've demonstrated to you recently, bishops aren't exactly keen on that. They're too busy counting dollars. That is the great tragedy of our time. We have had a loss of focus on basic things as Catholics. And so maybe if you're looking for a challenge for 2025 for yourself, pick up a devotional of some kind. If your devotional life is weak by traditional standards, pick something new up. If you haven't started praying the rosary, this is a great time to start. If you can only say 3 Hail Marys a day, if that's all you feel you can do and you're not doing that yet, start there. Eventually work your way to a decade a day, and then get to the 5-decade rosary every day. And then from there, this is where most Catholics are, try to do the full 15 decades every single day. Or 20 if you include the luminous mysteries for yourself. Again, a debate that I'm not interested in getting into. But try to get to a full rosary a day, or if you do the 5 decades, but you want to add something else, some other devotional, there are no shortages of devotionals that the church offers you in her treasury of graces. Now, the discussion here in this interview turns to the Synod on synodality. Mr. Haynes asks about synodality, restrictions on the Latin Mass, and a statement at the end of the Synod document saying the question of women's ordination remains open, because that's what they said. And here is Cardinal Burke's response. Quote, "No, it's false. It's a false statement that the question of women's ordination remains open. The Synod as a meeting has no authority to make such a pronouncement, and the final statement of the Synod has no authority. These are matters to be taken into consideration by the bishops in communion with the Roman pontiff, and only in that way can there be a further clarification of the Church's teaching. But certainly on the question of ordination to holy orders, what the Church has always and everywhere taught, that won't change. No one has yet defined what synodality is, and so it's a dangerous term because it becomes a slogan by which people introduce all their pet ideas, a number of which are contrary to the Church's constant teaching and practice. And so the faithful should be extremely cautious about this whole notion of synodality, and certainly how can you ask your bishop to be more synodal when you don't know what that is? The marks of the Church are one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. And that's how we identify ourselves. Those are unchanging marks. The Synod as an institution has existed in the Church, but it's a way for bishops and the Holy Father to consult the faithful and others about various questions. But it's always for the Holy Father and the bishops to maintain, in accordance with their office, fidelity to the teaching of Christ as has been handed down to us in an unbroken line through the apostolic tradition." End quote. Now, that interview with Cardinal Burke is just part one. There would be another part in probably this week at some point, and when it's published, I'll present it to you here. See how it's all connected, though? All of this is connected. The bishops lost sight of their mission, partially because the laity, in some ways, have lost sight of our mission, which is, of course, the spread. It's all the same mission. It's the spreading of the gospel, just we do it in accordance with our own state in life. All of us are called to spread the gospel. The bishops just have a much greater responsibility for it. That's why I would never want to be a bishop. Pick up a devotional if you can. You will be hard pressed to find anything less fruitful in your life than picking up a devotional, which will enrich your life as a Catholic. The Rosary being the most famous. There are others you can add on top of it, though. Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So does sharing it on social media. That helps too. And as always, pray for the Church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.